Hey guys, I am the MMA Breakdown, and we are doing predictions for UFC on Fox 24, Johnson versus Heist. Follow me on Twitter. My link is in the description at MMA Breakdown 0. And check out my predictions for the event taking place 1 week before this one, UFC 210, Cormier versus Johnson 2. If you haven't already, the link for that video will be in the description as well. All right, so starting with the first fight on UFC, or actually, I think most of these fights here are going to be on the FS1 card, but Wikipedia doesn't have them, doesn't have the bout placement finalized yet. So we're going to start with these fights that I think are probably all going to be on the FS1 card, but we'll just start with these ones. Aljamain Sterling versus Augusto Mendes. I'm going with Aljamain Sterling. Seems like a straightforward pick to make. Augusto Mendes, a jiu-jitsu guy coming into MMA, still young in his career, I believe, does not have that many fights, but to not get off track here, I think this should be a pretty easy fight for Sterling, who's a much better athlete and should have the more technical striking game. He does not have a very deep striking game. Doesn't really have a complete fluid striking to grappling game. And that was kind of exposed in his last couple of losses to Caraway and Rafael Assunção. But Mendes is not a great takedown artist. He is scrappy. I did think he exceeded expectations against Sainz. Was able to hurt Sainz a few times on the feet and get on top of him on the ground to win a decision, but should not be able to out-wrestle Sterling. Sterling should still have the wrestling advantage and does not have nearly the striking technique that Assunção had, and doesn't even have the kind of really gritty wrestling that Caraway has. So I think Sterling wins this one. He should be able to outstrike Mendes. Even in that Assunção fight, still made it pretty close and it was landing body kicks, and it was kind of a judgment about his body kicks versus Assunção's strikes with his hands. And both of his losses to Assunção and Caraway were both split decisions, so it's not like he's been getting blown out by either guy. And even in especially the Caraway fight, still had some great moments in that first round where he took Caraway down and had his back, but that's enough on that fight. I'm taking Sterling by decision, and he is one of my most confident picks on this card. All right, next fight at women's bantamweight, Ketlen Vieira versus Ashley Evans Smith. This one is a tough one to call, I think. Vieira coming off of her debut win over Kelly Fashholtz, where she pretty dominantly out-grappled her, controlled her on the ground. And Evan Smith is also a pretty solid wrestler, coming off of probably her best performance, well, easily her best performance in the UFC in her last fight against Veronica Macedo, where she was able to control her on the ground and eventually was able to pound her out for a TKO win. I think on the feet, Smith has a more technical game, although it's not really clean, sharp technique. She's kind of patient and low volume, lets her opponents kind of dictate the pace. But in that Macedo fight, did have some good clinch striking, some good knees from the clinch, and against Marion Renault, her striking did not look all that effective. And against Renault, her grappling was not that effective either. And actually Renault put her in a few guillotines, and I think Renault won the grappling battle in that fight. And I think Vieira is more committed to her wrestling than Evan Smith is. I think she's going to go to that takedown early. Smith is going to kind of wait around and see what Vieira gives her. And I think Vieira's control on the ground is a little better. Her ground and pound did not look as dangerous as Smith's did. But I think Vieira gets to work quicker than Smith and is just more aggressive, more proactive with her wrestling. So I'm going to take Vieira, but I think it's a tough one to call. I think it's a toss-up. All right, bantamweight, Patrick Williams versus Tom Duquesnoy, who's making his debut. I'm going with Duquesnoy here, French fighter, and looked at a couple of his recent fights, and he looks like a pretty good striker. He's aggressive, throws combinations, closes the distance well. Showed decent takedown defense in his, I believe it was his last fight against Philpott. And was eventually able to get the rear naked choke. Had a knockout by elbow in his fight before that. So I think he has too much craft and skill on the feet for Patrick Williams, who looked terrible against Chris Beal, where he got knocked out by flying knee. And that was a fight I heard a lot of analysts reference as an example of a terrible fight between two low-skilled guys. I mean, Williams was whiffing, but both guys were whiffing on a lot of their shots early. But then came out against Alejandro Perez and surprisingly nailed him with a big shot right out of the gate and choked him unconscious with a guillotine off of that. So does seem to have some athletic gifts, but Duquesnoy I think has more skill here. So I'm gonna take Duquesnoy to I'm gonna say win by TKO or submission. I think he's gonna overwhelm Williams with volume and just has too much skill for him. All right, at lightweight, Rashid Magomedov versus Bobby Green. This is a really great matchup that I'm excited for. Magomedov, a really technical striker, but kind of low output, against Bobby Green, who's a very unorthodox boxer, has a really funky rhythm, funky timing, and it's given his opponents problems. But lately, Bobby Green has not been fighting actively and has not looked great. Just got destroyed trying to out-brawl Poirier in the pocket, and against Edson Barboza, didn't really get blown out, but couldn't really deal with the technical kickboxing of Barboza. And that could be his downfall here against Magomedov. Should have a big technical advantage on the feet, but Magomedov, has I don't want to say really struggled with guys, but he just has an obvious, apparent lack of volume to his striking. When he does get finishes, they're usually late in the third round, and Bobby Green, I think, is going to be aggressive. He's going to be taunting him, trying to get in his head. And I think he's, and he can sway the judges too with his antics, like against Josh Thompson, where he didn't deserve to win that decision, but, was making it look like, Thompson's shots were not hurting him. And I think he can do that here against Magomedov. So I'm going to take Bobby Green by decision. I think his volume gets it done for him. It's going to be more aggressive. We saw in that Dariush fight that, Dariush, he is a technical fighter, technical Muay Thai fighter, but, he was able to kind of be more aggressive and walk down Magomedov. I think Bobby, it's really kind of a coin flip. But I'm gonna take Bobby Green. Magomedov had some concerning fights in the past there against guys like Rodrigo Dam, where at the end of the fight, both guys are kind of swinging away at each other. Dam hit him with some shots, and I thought that shouldn't have happened. He should have had a pretty big advantage over Dam, and a guy like Bobby Green is pretty crafty. So I'm sorry. I'm going to throw out my whole prediction, and I'm just going to take Magomedov. Bobby Green has been too inactive. I don't think he has the technique on the feet, and I think Magomedov's kind of going to just outclass him with more technical striking. So we're just going to throw that whole prediction out the window, and I'm going to go with Magomedov by decision. All right. On to now we'll do the Fight Pass prelims. At middleweight, Anthony Smith versus Andrew Sanchez. I like Andrew Sanchez. Looked pretty good in his last fight against Trevor Smith. Took out a veteran fighter, a pretty solid wrestler who's kind of notorious for laying praying and out grinding other debuting and young fighters looking to get themselves established in the UFC, and Sanchez looked pretty good against him. Anthony Smith, when he has a striking advantage against guys, he can look really good. He's good in a brawl. Looked great against Mutapcic in his last fight after struggling with takedowns in the first round. Just destroyed him in those in the second round on the feet. I was able to outbrawl Leonardo Augusto Guimaraes. But in a technical fight, like against Cesar Ferreira, he just cannot get anything going on the feet, and just got taken down at will by Ferreira. And against a pretty solid wrestler like Sanchez, who can transition pretty well between striking and takedowns, and who just looks like an intelligent fighter, I think he's going to get out-wrestled. Sanchez is hittable, though. I think in that Trevor Smith fight, Smith connected early, and it looked like a hard shot that slightly wobbled Sanchez. So Smith could hurt him, but I think Sanchez has that wrestling game down pretty well, and I think he's going to out-wrestle Smith here. All right, at welterweight, Zach Cummings versus Nathan Coy. I don't really know what this is. Cummings had that loss to Ponzinibbio a couple fights ago, but rebounded really well against Yakovlev, and this just looks like a fight set up to make Cummings look really good over an old, aging, very one-dimensional fighter in Coy. I think Coy's going to get Darce choked. We saw that against Luque on Tough. Cummings has a Darce choke and finished, was it Ben Alloway? Yeah, Ben Alloway. They submitted by Darce choke in his first UFC fight. And I think Coy's just going to be going for that takedown over and over again without any real caution, and he's going to get submitted. That's kind of the book on Coy against Danny Roberts. Took him down and got submitted by a triangle. So Cummings is younger, way more athletic, more skilled, maybe not as good of a pure wrestler, not as good of a takedown artist as Coy, but Cummings should have the submission edge, and on the feet, Cummings has a pretty solid boxing game with big power. So if it did stay on the feet, I think he'd destroy Coy, but I will think Coy is going to shoot in recklessly. Cummings will get that front headlock and Darce him up. So Cummings by maybe first round submission. All right, at middleweight, Devin Clark versus Jake Collier. I like this fight because Clark is one of these guys who's looks like he's got technical ability and skill and is really athletic, but doesn't really have that grit to him, and has trouble putting his whole game together. He's also a good wrestler, and he was looking really good against Alex Nicholson in his debut, and in a really weird kind of scramble exchange, he ended up getting knocked out. Like while he was trying to get back to his feet, he was on his knees, I think, when he got knocked out. And then his last fight against Josh Stansbury, again, we saw that skill, that athleticism, but kind of faded as the fight went on, and couldn't really keep up the pace or the advantage he had early. And I think against a guy like Collier, who will be at a technical and athletic and at a wrestling disadvantage, I think he's going to hang in there and make it dirty in the last couple rounds, in the second and third rounds. And I don't know if Clark, I don't know if Clark has the durability, that grit to really go far in the sport, honestly. Because the loss to Nicholson was bad, and then I expected a finish against Stansbury, but instead he just kind of seemed to fade and couldn't really build on what he was doing early in the fight. And we've seen that from Collier. Was kind of getting dominated by Uda, and then came back to finish him, just overwhelmed him on the feet. But then again, got finished by Miranda after out wrestling him early. Dongyi Yang, he looked terrible. Yang TKO'd him on the ground. So, maybe Clark is able to make use of that wrestling and maybe ground and pound him out. But I don't know. I don't trust Clark's durability, honestly. So I'm going to take Collier to win a decision or to get a second or third round TKO. All right, at flyweight, this is on the FS1 prelims. Tim Elliott versus Louis Smolka. I love this fight, and I want to say that this is, on paper, really closely, a really even matchup between two really active, high-energy scramblers with really crafty grappling and submission games. But Smolka, I have to say that performance against Ben Nguyen, where he looked amazing, where he looked violent and brutal with his ground and pound, I think it was just a fluke, honestly. I think Ben Nguyen would beat him in a rematch. Because since that Nguyen fight, Moreno comes out, jumps on a guillotine, puts him away. In that first round, couple minutes into the fight, and Smolka looks like, he looked heartbroken after that loss. Like he couldn't believe that the universe would allow Moreno to beat him. And then just looked awful against Ray Borg. Had absolutely nothing for him. Missed weight badly, and then just got trashed by Ray Borg. Dominated on the ground. Trying to roll around and look for submission openings, and Borg gave him none of that. Just dominated on the ground and just outboxed. And if you look at his record in the UFC. Has done badly, even in fights that he won, like against Vasilik, was getting badly outstruck, lost to Chris Cariaso. It's not really a pretty record. So against Tim Elliott, who came off of an amazing performance against Demetrius Johnson, or at least had amazing moments and did things to Johnson that we haven't seen anyone do in a very long time, if ever. I think Elliott's just going to dominate him, honestly. Elliott's not as much of a control, not nearly the control kind of wrestler or grappler that a guy like Borg is. He's going to give Smolka those opportunities to scramble and to play a submission game with him, but even in that hand fight, that was kind of back and forth, and Smolka didn't really gain the advantage until late, until he was able to hurt Holohan on the feet. And I don't know, Smolka, I don't think he can make that weight anymore. And Elliott looked really good on his run through tough. I don't think Elliott gets submitted by Smolka. I think he wins those scrambles, so I'm going to take Elliott by decision. All right, at heavyweight, Alexander Volkov versus Roy Nelson. This is a fun matchup. On paper, you would think Roy Nelson should run over this guy, but Roy Nelson has not looked good lately, even in his knockout win over Bigfoot. Nelson seems to be losing a step athletically, a big step. It seems like that excess weight is really taking a toll on him now in his advanced age more than ever, and just seems really hesitant, very weirdly hesitant to pull the trigger. He does this thing where he tries to stalk the guy and has them circling the fence like he did to Bigfoot, and just will not let his hands go. I thought his performance against Rosholt was terrible. Really seemed concerned about the takedown and would not let his hands go. And his chin might be going a bit too. Took some really hard shots from Black Beast. Hunt knocked him out a couple years ago. And a guy like Volkov, who's really tall and skinny, it might look like a Stefan Struve versus Roy Nelson situation on the surface of it. But Volkov, he showed some pretty technical boxing and used his length very well, unlike a fighter like Struve. And against a guy like Nelson, who just seems to have a lot more trouble closing the distance and pulling the trigger and exploding like he did several years ago, I think Volkov might be able to just stay at range and pick him off with knees and his long strikes. So I'm kind of feeling Volkov for a decision here. Tim Johnson, I think, is more of a mobile fighter than Nelson is at this point. And, Volkov had some moments where he hurt him, and he did get dropped by Johnson in that fight. Nelson still has the power, but, Bigfoot is really kind of a sitting duck. And if Nelson was gun-shy against him, I don't really see how he gets it done against Volkov. So I'm taking Volkov by decision. All right, on to the main card on Fox. Jeremy Stephens versus Renato Moicano at featherweight. I'm taking Jeremy Stephens. I don't see how Moicano wins this. He had a nice submission win over Tom Niinamaki in his debut, although I don't know what that really means since Niinamaki quickly was out of the UFC, I believe, or at least hasn't fought, I think, since that fight. And then followed that up with a split decision win over Zubaira Tukhugov, who was not proven to be a high-level fighter or a rising prospect. So I don't see what Moicano can do. Jeremy Stephens has only been improving fight to fight. Looked really good in the fight against Barao. Nearly finished Edgar. So I have to go with Stephens, who should have a big power and striking advantage over Moicano. This just looks like a setup fight to me. So Stephens by knockout, one of my most confident picks. All right, and at middleweight, a fight that I am incredibly excited for. I can't remember the last fight that I was as excited for as I am this one. Jacare Souza versus Robert Whittaker, and I think this is an extremely interesting matchup because we have seen very little of Whittaker having to fight on the ground. You'd have to go back to his fight against Brad Scott in his UFC debut, the tough finale fight, and very brief sequences against Uriah Hall to see Whittaker on the ground really at all. Now, I'm sure that if Souza gets him down and it becomes a prolonged grappling battle, to say Whittaker could, well, he's certainly not going to submit Souza or out grapple Souza, but could he survive? I don't know. He might be able to. What I think is more of the what I think is a bigger problem and bigger question here is, will Souza make Whittaker respect his striking enough to be able to close the distance and get him down? That's the main question, I think, here. If you look at Souza's most recent fight against Boch, first takedown attempt, it was stuffed. And if you look at the other guys Souza's been beating recently, and Souza, I respect him a lot, elite fighter, superb on the ground, even though he's a very good striker as well. Phenomenal submission artist, but it is. We do need to consider that the guys Jacare has beaten recently are guys that he can completely overwhelm with his grappling and his athleticism. Guys like Boch and over the hill Belfort, Chris Camozzi. And I don't expect Whittaker to go down that easily, either being taken down or once he's on the ground. I don't think he's as helpless off of his back as those guys. So I think Whittaker has a speed advantage here over Souza, and I think he has a technical striking advantage. Souza's a very good striker, but I don't think he's going to be wanting to mix it up with Whittaker like Brunson did. Souza doesn't have that kind of one-shot fight-ending power to take that risk. If you look at his fight against Yoel Romero, who's another very dangerous striker, can end the fight with one shot, he really could not get into his rhythm, and his wrestling game was really kind of nullified. Didn't get into a rhythm until later in the fight when Romero started to fade, and then Souza was able to take him down and did, I think, clip him with a shot on the feet that hurt Romero. But I think Whittaker, if he's committed to playing a range game, he uses a lot of movement to keep Souza guessing, keep him off balance. I think he's going to be able to keep this fight on the feet. He's going to be able to score and really make Souza uncomfortable to the point where Souza's not going to be able to just blitz him and take him down like he's done to these other guys. And I think that the fact that this is a 3-round fight hugely favors Whittaker because he'll only have to get off to an early lead and throw Souza off for a round or two to win the fight, whereas if it was a 5-round fight, Souza would have a lot more time to hit that takedown. So you know what? I'm going to make the upset pick. I'm going to go with Whittaker. If Souza gets him down, he's, like I said, phenomenal submission artist, and we haven't really seen any of Whittaker's ground game, at least for a meaningful amount of time. But I think people are just going to overlook that striking matchup where Souza is good, but Whittaker's better, and Whittaker's got more power. And Souza, when he's had to fight these really high-level strikers like Romero, he's not the same dominant wrestler that he is when he faces guys that he can really overwhelm athletically, and he doesn't have to worry about getting countered. So I'm going to take Whittaker for a decision, but I know it's a bit of an insane pick, but that's what I'm doing, Whittaker by decision. All right, a women's strawweight, Rose Namajunas versus Michelle Waterson. Another interesting, closely matched fight. That fight against Kowalkiewicz, I thought that I thought Namajunas had lost it more unimpressively than she actually did, and when I went back to rewatch that fight, that was a pretty close fight, and I thought Namajunas easily could have won it. It was not nearly as dominant as I had remembered it being. So Namajunas, she has enough striking skill, especially at range, to hang around with some high level fighters like Kovalkovich. Against Torres, she wasn't all that dominant, but still managed to outstrike her. And she had a length advantage there, which I believe she'll have here as well. But Waterson has been on this tear. She seems really confident, seems in a great place. Namajunas, coming off of that loss to Kovalkovich, and I don't know what the situation is with Pat Barry, but I think she's talked about that and that having affected her mentally. And I just think that Waterson is a better technical striker than Namajunas. A little bit. Namajunas more of a brawler, more willing to mix it up and get her hands dirty, maybe a little more than Waterson. But Waterson, really likes to pick her shots very carefully at range, makes her shots count. And I think that kind of precision, being composed, I think she's going to get the win here against Namajunas. I also think she could hit some takedowns on Namajunas, possibly. And we know that Namajunas is kind of weak on the ground against strong wrestlers, and Waterson is not a strong wrestler and actually picked against her in the Van Zandt fight because of that. But Waterson, she has a decent judo game, and we saw against Van Zandt can take the back. I think she might be a little more skilled on the ground than Namajunas, and I always hate doing MMA math, but if you compare their fights against Van Zandt, Waterson got her out of there in the first round, and Namajunas, I think it wasn't until the fifth round that she beat Van Zandt. Yeah, the fifth round. So I think Waterson's a little more dangerous and can play more of a speed chess game, whereas Namajunas kind of likes to dominate people for over several rounds. So Waterson's got the momentum here. I think a more technical striker at range. Probably has some more tools to work with between her hands and feet, and I think probably also a better technician on the ground than Namajunas. So I'm going to go with Waterson by decision. But Namajunas could have that volume advantage, and she could take Waterson's back in a scramble like she did to Angela Hill. Namajunas is an aggressive fighter and can really capitalize. So interesting fight, but I like Waterson for this one. Waterson by decision. All right, and then the main event, the flyweight title fight, Demetrius Johnson versus Wilson Reis. We'll keep it short and sweet. I think Johnson totally dominates Reis. And I'm really surprised that a lot of people seem to be thinking that Reis has a chance here. Probably because Elliott very surprisingly gave Johnson a good run for his money, at least in that first round where it looked like he had Johnson in a pretty tight choke. But did you guys see that fight against Yuta Sasaki? That was an awful fight. Sasaki gave him so much trouble, and Sasaki's a guy who is that fighter? Leandro Issa had submitted this guy who took him down, destroyed him on the ground, just wore him out, and submitted him with the neck crank in the second round. And Sasaki gave Reis such a tough fight. I mean, Sasaki is, or Heiss is a really dangerous submission artist, and his striking game has been coming along well. It looked good against Ortiz. And, he can get guys out of there early with his submissions like Hector Sandoval and Scott Jorgensen. But Heiss, his resume is now without blemishes. You look at that Joby Sanchez fight, his debut at flyweight, got nailed with a head kick. The Formiga fight, got outstruck, got his back taken. And then the Yuta Sasaki fight, Sasaki really had his moments and really made him work on the ground. So I don't know why anyone's thinking that he's got a shot against Johnson. I think Johnson should dominate him on the feet, and if Sasaki could survive on the ground against him and get him in some bad positions, Johnson absolutely should be able to. Who always has a really well-timed shot and is a really good grappler from top position, and who has shown an improved ability to finish on the ground. So I think it's going to be a typical Johnson fight where he's super technical and really takes precautions to stay defensive, stay out of danger. I think he's going to win kind of a boring decision. So Johnson by decision. All right, guys, those are my predictions for UFC on Fox, Johnson versus Heiss. Thank you for watching. Follow me on Twitter. My link is in the description at MMA Breakdown 0. And check the description for a link to my prediction video for Cormier, for UFC 210 Cormier versus Johnson 2. Thank you, guys. Hey, guys, and just as in my last video, I forgot to give you my 5 most confident picks. So they are Demetrius Johnson, Jeremy Stevens, Tim Elliott, Zach Cummings, and Aljamain Sterling. And the ones that I feel most confident in out of those, or truly confident, would be Johnson, Stevens, and Zach Cummings. All right, guys, thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.